midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, AJ Vaughan. He is the founder of the E1B2 Collective. AJ, thanks so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit more about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thanks a lot. That's a lot to remember. So AJ is my name. Most people see me on LinkedIn and call me Anthony, but AJ is fine. He is my pronoun. And then as far as my background, is that what the question was?
Yeah, a little bit about yourself
Yeah.
and when you were younger, at any age, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Let me answer that now, and then I'll go
Okay.
back to my background. What did I say at that time? I think there were two things. I played D1 football, so I wanted to be an NFL player at one time. And then when I realized that wasn't going to work, are you familiar with Entourage?
Yes, I am.
I wanted to be Ari,
Yeah.
which you know, look at the later seasons when I think because he was really brash in the first probably 3 seasons, but as he kind of, tapered off, I liked his approach to business and some other things. So I think I wanted to be like an agent, whether it was in the sports or entertainment.
Mhm.
And I guess a little bit about me, started a business at 19, made a really strategic partnership with Under Armour, scaled that brand. 2 years later, made a pretty crucial mistake as we were entering 7 figures and 60 plus in staff that would fall into the category of employee experience and people ops, and learned from that and started studying pretty intensely, and inevitably found myself, after running a second brand a little shortly after that business ended because of those mistakes, I found myself as a people internally, pretty much honestly trying to right the wrong of that original mistake from my very first business. And the kind of the rest is history. I have a podcast where I just crossed over 600 episodes, speaking, writing. I've been internally ahead of people for multiple brands, as well as built the E1B2 Collective, which still today is, at one point it was about 5 different companies as like a holding brand, but now it's about 2 different brands, Beyond Brand Studios as well as Beyond Resume. And we're doing a lot of great work trying to put employees first, hence the employees first, business second title. So
I love that. I'm more of a Ballers person. I think that's also on HBO Max, but I
it
have
was,
watched a few episodes of Entourage.
well, Ballers, they say the Rock character was inspired a bit by, I think, the Entourage persona, though he's not as rude as Ari is.
Yes. I actually did not know that, but I love The Rock and
Yeah,
his character.
yeah.
My next question for you is around, it's in the title, company culture, and folks want to know, especially now as the world of work is progressively changing and there's more changes to come, what are qualitative and quantitative ways we can measure company culture and keep a pulse on what's happening, see where we need to make progress, and see what's working?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of pulse surveys. So from a quantitative standpoint, I think that every single company should be having pulse surveys happening. I think at a minimum on a monthly basis. I've even seen companies, and I've even pushed for on a bi-weekly basis, just to get a nice pulse of what's happening. And then obviously the most important thing is taking that data and actually doing something with it and trying to make some impact. If you see a little bit of a shuffling here, I have my dog who won't stop barking, so I apologize.
You're good.
Um, but also, from a qualitative perspective, I'm a big fan of conversations. I think every single manager, actually, I'll shift here. Lots of heads of people that I've talked to have trouble scaling out a lot of their initiatives. And what Angela R. Howard, and I'll give her a big plug, has taught me is that a lot of the work that we do as chief people officers should be scaled across the org by taking advantage of our managers. So our managers should be doing the bulk of these one-on-one conversations clearly. But even beyond that, the managers should be storing and calculating and understanding this data themselves, and actually coming up with really strategic initiatives that they should be stewarding. I think a lot of organizations have heads of people that are looking at this data and then stewarding what should happen next. the managers should be taught. So I think really having those qualitative and contextual conversations are really important. So
Yeah, I think context is really important, those two-way conversations to understand every employee's experience and really resourcing and investing in managers to have those conversations. What
yeah.
would you say is the difference between quote unquote good company culture and great employer of choice company culture?
So what's the difference between good and great?
Yeah.
Mm, I would take both, right? Um, that's an interesting question. I think good looks like here's a good one. I think good looks like most of the organization feeling like they can be productive and mildly happy with their roles, right? They feel like they can go to their manager if they have a glaring issue. They feel comfortable enough to do that. They feel like they like the autonomy and the structure of their role just enough where they don't feel like they need to look for another company to work at. They like the salary they get just enough. So that'll probably be good, right? Like if nothing is glaring, there's no fires. I think great looks like really contextual variables. I think great for me looks like every single employee across the board, whether you have 1,000-person company or 100-person company, they understand and have personalized career mapping tracks. They understand and have personalized conversations with their direct reports and their managers and their supervisors. Their managers and supervisors have the autonomy and the green light from the chief people officer to really dictate learning and development programs that are contextual to that person and really be able to innovate and do interesting things within their teams of 8 or 12 or 15. All those things can be scaled up to retention and higher productivity and all those things. So I think great looks like more contextual nuances. I think good looks like lots of great effort across the board around all things people, where folks don't have a strong desire to immediately leave, but at the same time, they have a little bit of an inkling that more could be happening. So that would probably be my answer: good versus
Yeah.
great.
No, I think that definitely makes sense in terms of contextual and also having that growth mindset of if something is working really well, scaling that out. If something's not working really well, iterating on it until it is working too. And I know we just mentioned managers as well, but you might not be talking to the CEO every day or, chief people officer, but you're regularly having conversations with your managers of other different departments. And some individual contributors want to become that person who leads a team, empowers other people to do great work. In an
Mm.
ideal world, in your experience, what is the best way to train, invest, and resource those new people managers?
I'll give you kind of an out of the box answer with this one. I think the best thing to do, even before you get to training, is really understand and kind of have like a rubric around what a people manager actually should be versus what a operational tactical thought leader subject matter expert leader should be. So I'm working with the company right now where we're doing like two in a box models
Okay.
where, let's say you're talking about the marketing division, for instance, before we put anyone in that quote unquote people leading seat, there's also an operational tactical leader at that seat. So there'll be a co-CMO, if you will, right?
Mhm.
Where one of the CMOs will be very tactical in the weeds around the latest, the latest surge of what the company could be doing from an NFT perspective or influencer marketing or TikTok or Facebook, ads or SEO, whatever the case is going to be. Really tactical insights where all the folks underneath of that individual can really go to them for, again, tactical best practice information. But then you have a people leader that is more emotional, that's doing a lot of the career mapping conversations, that's making sure that everyone's workflows are contextual to how they actually want to experience the work, that you can actually go to, that can give you that mentorship and that guidance. So that's kind of my mindset around what I think the leadership role should honestly look like. But then backing up a little bit to get directly to your answer, I think the best thing you can do from a training perspective is do the deep dive to understand which type of leaders they actually want to be, and then have trainings built in and work with your learning and development departments to build out the rubrics connected to that operational tactical type leader or that humanistic emotional EQ type leader, and then go through the due diligence process to train them and onboard them and make sure they actually have a good feeling of what that looks like. And then the last thing I'll say, the rubrics, the trainings that the learning and development folks utilize should be driven, in my personal opinion, not from historical data around what a great people leader looks like, but what the people inside the company actually need. So it's a difference there. If you go to your company of 100, they'll tell you for them personally what a great people leader will look like emotionally and what a great tactical leader operationally looks like. That should significantly influence the rubric and a lot of the learning and development trainings that you'll be putting in place. So that was a lot, but those are my thoughts probably.
No, I think that's important to ask those curiosity-based questions, to really do an analysis beforehand. And I like that 2-to-1 kind of organizational structure, because it's important to focus on the tactical, how we're going to meet these goals, but also career pathing, internal mobility. People want to feel like the work that they are doing are making an impact on the business too. So having that two-pronged approach is definitely interesting as well. For both leaders, what are your thoughts on kind of measuring that effectiveness of leaders? What questions can they ask themselves, or how should we gauge if someone is a great people manager?
You're going to keep getting the same answer from me, unfortunately. And it's in the title of the company that I run. Go to your people first. I think the most important data is going to be, if you're leading a team of 8, if I'm a chief people officer, I'm making sure every single team of 8, 12, 15, whatever it's going to be, I want to pull the data from them first. And I want to educate the employees around what a great leader actually looks like for this company. What should they be looking for? What can they identify as a great experience, right? Tactical as well as emotional. And then once I've educated employees what a great leader actually looks like and feels like and is, then they are educated enough to tell me personally, okay, well, here are some changes that I actually would like. Here are some changes that I actually felt really comfortable about. And no, like Andrew over there is amazing, and here's exactly why. I think many employees have not actually experienced a lot of great leaders, so they actually don't know what a great leader looks like. I think they think that a great leader is someone that answers an email, seems to talk to them somewhat nicely, and is there if you need them. Leaders, the word leadership for me, emotionally and tactically, mean a lot more. And so the first step I would probably do is educate the employees around what that looks like, contextual to the company, and then put them in position of power through surveys and through contextual conversations to let us know if the leadership is doing the job for them, not just at the macro level of what we think leadership is.
Mm-hmm. That context, that two-way conversation, understanding someone's experience, you need to get the full picture. I think some of the great leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with have had kind of that common characteristic of communication, being effective communicators, having that level of transparency and active listening. From
Yep.
your experience, what does that transparent communication look like in practice at really healthy organizations who foster that uh, kind of communication with employees?
Well, it looks like being transparent and loving them first, right? So, I'll go back to, I remember, I think I watched this off of like a Will Smith movie because he does a good job doing these like emotional type films where I think he was telling, maybe it was Jaden, I don't know. He was telling one of the kids in the movie, because Jaden's playing a lot of his movies. I love, what is the kid loves me? Essentially, the parent loves the kid first, right? And that's why kids love parents, right? Because we love them first. And it's the same mindset in my mind from a leadership perspective. And
Mhm.
so if we want to have transparent and honest conversations that have emotional safety and psychological safety baked in, we have to love them first. We have to be honest and transparent and fluid and vulnerable with our employees first. And that can happen in a multitude of ways. I think number one, if there's issues that where you are not showing up correctly for your employees, call it out first. Be brave enough to say, look, I should have showed up differently. My internal communication strategy should have been different in this way. The way that I rolled out this new work that we're trying to take advantage of should have been rolled out differently in this way. I dropped the ball this way. Be vulnerable, be honest. Let them know some of the fears that you have. That's going to kind of show that employee that you're not only a human, but you're willing to admit a mistake. And so when you go to have some of those fluid, honest, transparent conversations, they're going to feel really comfortable doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really
So
acknowledging
love them first.
who you are. Absolutely. And modeling that
Exactly.
behavior as well, making sure your actions align with those words too. I think from a people or human resources perspective, 20 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, the reputation of the department of employees or team members feeling comfortable going and having a conversation with someone would be low. And just more folks are wanting to build that trust internally, get ahead of things, really be proactive in building a great psychologically safe company culture. And part of that is what you said in terms of modeling that transparent communication. Trust takes time, but how else have you seen human resources and people teams really effectively build and continue to cultivate that trust internally within the organization?
Uh, I think another way is, and this I'll get a little dark here in this one. Re- Making sure, let's use the chief people officer again for an example. Making sure before you take the job to be a chief people officer, you work with your CEO or your COO, whoever you're reporting to, that you have enough autonomy and bandwidth and enough clear understanding of like leadership rubrics to make an argument to remove some leaders based off of emotional variables that are not glaringly obvious. I'll give you a couple examples, right? Like where I'm a big fan clearly of like contextualizing things. And I'm looking up because I'm trying to like form my thoughts. If you
Yeah.
guys are looking up, there's nothing up there. Uh, right? Like I'm a big fan of context. So for me, if I'm noticing a leader has not done their job to really understand someone that's on their team contextually, again, I'll use examples. Decision making, like what is this employee's preference around decision making? Are you doing a good enough job of getting them information as fast as you can because you know that's how they're going to work best? And this is one of the key stakeholders in this given department. If that is going to turn into that particular employee who is a high performing employee to potentially leave the company, because we know people leave companies typically because of their managers, not because of the product, the service, or the macro culture. That's subtle, but that's a problem.
Right.
I see many leaders get fired or removed for either glaringly obvious, emotional EQ variables, racism moments, just complete disrespect with their words and tonality, whatever the case is going to be. And in most cases, they get removed for their teams not really, performing from a productivity perspective. But what I just said is subtle enough where if you're getting the employee data, there's enough where you can be able to say, you know what, this leader's not making things contextual enough because that's gonna surface across the organization over time. So to answer your question directly, I would make sure that chief people officers have enough bandwidth where they can make a very strong, heavy recommendation to say these managers, based off of the rubric and the curriculum that we've designed around what a great leader is in this company, they're not meeting up to these expectations. And we're noticing that these three employees here that are incredibly important to our bottom line, as well as the just the overall vibes and culture, they're considering leaving because of these subtle variables.
Right.
There's an argument that could be made that they should be moved out of the company. Um, and so I know that was a long answer and a little bit of a different one, but something that I'm hoping a lot of people really kind of think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need that context. You need to have that proactivity and intentionality behind making time, making sure folks have the bandwidth to spend time thinking about effective communication too. Have you seen employee feedback management as an important tool to really building that trust? And have you seen that manifest at other kind of successful organizations too, where they continually think about strategizing for how we can listen to the voice of the employee?
Two ways. I'll talk about onboarding. I've pushed a lot of companies recently in the first 90 days to collect information and data from the new hires around how they would like feedback to be given and making sure leaders are actually looking at that data, looking at that information that is stored and utilizing that when feedback moments are occurring and
Right.
making sure that people officers are holding the managers accountable to that data. And then also once a quarter, in my personal opinion, and I know that makes you extreme, again, using the chief people officer as an example,
Mhm.
I want to put together a plan where I want to jump into the teams of each department in the organization, and I want to understand from the employees' points of views if they feel like the feedback systems, processes, and the way that they're receiving the feedback, again, contextually works for them. And if there's any glaring issues that we need to recognize, or if there's any subtleties that we need to kind of pay attention to. So I talked about the onboarding in the beginning of the recruiting, because that's going to do best for long term of the org, right? You have a recruiting function now. 6 months later, that's going to make your culture look good moving forward, and kind of focusing on in the beginning, and then making sure each quarter you're just double checking to make sure that the feedback is being done in a way that is contextual to them, that's creating a lot of psychological safety, as well as getting both the leader and the employee enough feedback to each other to make sure we can make some adjustments to product, to service, to processes, whatever it's going to be. So those are probably my two answers there.
Getting in there, asking how employees are thinking, how they're feeling, what's working and what's not, and continually asking as well. You mentioned kind of getting in there, if using the example as the chief people officer too, on a quarterly basis in terms of systems of feedback. One of the ways that you can get that is anonymously. And I want to kind of ask why it's important to really offer anonymous ways to give feedback in terms of psychological safety and it being part of this holistic kind of strategy for the organization.
Now, this is something that it took me a while to actually learn.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell my energy, my personality, and I just went out this past weekend for a friend's birthday. I'm that guy in the bar where I'll just randomly go up and put my arm around you and just have a conversation. I don't care who you are, right? I am that guy. Throughout my entire life, I assumed everyone else was like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, I've been sadly mistaken that most people are actually not like that. So most people, no matter how much psychological safety you feel that you have, they may not want you to be directly connected to some of the feedback that they want to give. They just may not be that transparent, that open to be able to actually have it connected to them. So I think for those folks, that's kind of the answer I would give. Like, I've learned that the anonymous feedback creates a moment where we can all feel very safe and comfortable to just tell it how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people are not going to be like me to just tell it how it is, regardless of the context. Most folks have a little bit more of that wall up where you want to be able to give them that moment to say, you know what, we just want to know the truth, keep it anonymous. And so I think there's a lot of empathy with that process. That's why I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we want to hear from everyone. And if, folks are not comfortable raising their hand at all hands or speaking up with their manager on day 1 or day 30, I think opening up those spaces definitely makes sense. And I think that a lot of people over the past few years have kind of taken that feedback, whether it is anonymous or from their manager, or, at a company level, to make changes, to make sure that they are providing an equitable, inclusive, and, great place to work, since we spend lots of our time at work. Can you tell me about an innovation or a non-business as usual initiative you've seen companies really kind of lean into? Some examples could be kind of more authentic, real mental health benefits, asynchronous work. What are your thoughts there?
There's a company out here, Comped, by Amy Sperling, that I like a lot. I actually had her on my podcast early on when they were just getting funding. They have an interesting thing where they contextualize their benefits. So instead of just at a max, so essentially how they work, I'm trying to describe this in like 12 seconds. They have a process where they help the companies figure out how much financials they want to allocate towards benefits outside of the traditional benefits, right? Medical, dental, things of that nature, vision, whatever the case is going to be. But they contextualize it. So for instance, they'll say, Christina, you have $1,000 for this quarter. What would you like to spend that $1,000 on?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be anything. And I quite mean anything. You may say, you know what? There's a new makeup line that I'm just super excited about. Or, you know what? I love the artist Russ, and I know he's going on tour this summer. I would love to buy a few tickets. So, you know what? I'm super excited about the baseball season coming up. Myself and my partner, we would love to catch a few Red Sox games, whatever it's going to be, right? Like, and I love the contextual nature of that, because it really connects the engagement and the productivity of getting more things done to the benefits to something they actually want, and not something that the company thinks that they want. So I know that was a little bit of an out of the box answer, but I love the fact that they're doing that, because I don't see a lot of companies doing that. The company Comp, obviously they have like a tech platform to kind of automatically manage that. But I think there's an Excel sheet, scrappy way that you could do that in your company today without utilizing a comp. So I like that as an idea. If that can work for that answer or that question rather.
Yeah, I mean, I like your out of the box answers. And I think that speaks to what a lot of folks are talking about too, and not assuming what people want and need at different stages of their career, different stages of their life, having a conversation, and also that idea of personalization at scale and making sure that people are getting the resources that they need, and knowing that you can continue to kind of change as well throughout your time at the organization too. I know I was talking to someone and they said that they're kind of mental health benefits, like for their kind of the budget that they had was using Instacart because they have 4 children and it takes some time to take 4 children to the grocery store. And that's what they decided to use it for. So that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
AJ, is there anything that I didn't ask in this conversation around reimagining company culture that you would like to share with folks who are listening, or maybe underscoring one or two key takeaways? I know maybe one of them has to do with context, but I always like to ask.
Yeah. I would say, getting back to context, I'll flip it around what the companies could be doing proactively. So right now, I'm really what's really top of mind for me is the recruiting I think there's a lot that we can do when it comes to culture, employee experience, retention. There's a lot we can do in the beginning, right? I think we can get it right from the start, and it can really impact how the employees are going to perceive the companies as they get into it. So, not to do a direct plug, but I do work with a few brands around my company, Beyond Brand, where we pretty much help organizations understand major categories of what I like to call operational realities, and
Mhm.
explain really authentically what's happening in the company today, not historically. So, not employer branding, but be transparent and honest around, here's how we make decisions. Here are the KPIs and the OKRs of how we're going to judge this particular role. Here are the leadership personalities right now, because we're going through a merger, because we're going through an acquisition, because look, we just dealt with a lot of turnover. So this particular role, we need the ramp up time to be pretty quick in the first 90 days. And here's how much we actually can do to help you from a learning and development standpoint. And here's frankly how much, we don't have that much bandwidth to do X, Y, and Z. Is that going to work for you? So I feel like if companies can get a little bit more authentic and transparent and honest about the flaws, the gray areas, and the great things about the culture through any sort of communication medium that you create
Right.
early on in the process, you can get it right. Let employees know what they're actually getting into, which will say a lot about you as a company, which a lot of human beings will respect. So
Never too early to start getting things right and trying to test things, and also getting feedback from employees during the onboarding process, as you were talking about too, and really building out and fostering, continuing to foster that culture as
yeah.
employees grow within the organization too. So we love proactivity, authenticity, and getting that feedback and that context. AJ, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thanks a lot.
As a reminder for folks who are listening on AllVoices, we really believe in that employee feedback management as a requirement for the organization to really succeed overall. Have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone.